This week on RVER, sponsored by Progressive Insurance.
Hey, Chief, we got a damaged RV on its way to the OR.
Well, that sounds like a job for the new head of RV surgery.
Wait, are you promoting me?
Congrats, Martinez.
Doctor, that RV's flatlining.
Well, that sounds like a job for the new head of nursing.
So you're just promoting everyone now?
Yeah, kind of looks that way, doesn't it?
When your RV really needs saving, Progressive has you covered. See if you could save with a leader in RV insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates, covered subject to policy terms.
Welcome to BreezeLine, where the sky's the limit thanks to better internet. With lightning-fast speeds up to 1 gig, you can game like a boss, stream like a pro, and watch like there's no tomorrow. Stream, watch, post, send, and trend. Do it all with our fiber-powered network, bringing you reliable, fast internet. Welcome to BreezeLine. Visit breezeline.com for latest offers. Service subject to availability. New customers in select areas only. Visit breezeline.com for details.
Welcome to the Psychovertical podcast. This is me, Andy Kirkpatrick. It's Sunday morning, and that baby's still asleep. So I've sneaked upstairs to try and do a podcast. So I hope you appreciate it. Anything been going on? Nothing's been going on. Actually, I've got a few questions here. I need to, and if you like, I've been sitting on my computer for a while, so I'm going to answer those. But actually, it's funny. I got back in touch with. I did Johnny Dawes. Some of you know Johnny Dawes is like when Johnny Dawes wrote his book. Is it called Touching Myself or something? It's something with myself. I ended up doing like the Kindle version of the book for him, which is like, it's not that difficult, but it's a bit of a pain. It's a bit like trying to do a website like in 2000, like it was like doing like HTML and. Back in the day, it was like it was very difficult. Like the first website I ever did, I was going to Greenland and we needed a website. So I had this guy Ben Saunders, who maybe I've mentioned him before. Like Ben Saunders he probably still is the person I'd always look to of like if you can look at people, and really envy them, and you can either hate them. And it's like, what's that thing about? What's the thing? It's like swallowing poison and wanting the other person to die. Like when you kind of hate people, you really envy. Like a lot. We live in the world of envy these days. But anyway, I just looked at Ben, and like my instinct was just to hate him because he was all suave and sophisticated. He lived in London. He could wear. He was one of those people where you could just like the wear it's like someone out of the what's that film? The thing not the League of Gentlemen. But he just he always wore like brogues and chinos and the shirt, and like was he a man's man? I don't know, but he was like, so it looked like he'd been to. Been in the army or something, and you'd be like hanging out at the Royal Geographical Society and popping into Google and, drinking, gin and tonics on some roof terrace somewhere in London. And I was like stuck in Sheffield. I was like, it's one of those, anyway, but he'd skied to the North Pole. That was his kind of claim to fame. Anyway, but I remember it was probably like a good moment for me where because I'm not supposed to talk about class on this podcast anymore, being working class, but by the way, the class, you're always the same class. You never get out of it. So you could be, if you're born whatever class you are, you could be born to the aristocracy, and you could end up being a crack addict living on the streets of Manchester, but you're still an aristocrat. And it's the same with if you're working class or middle class or whatever. Anyway, but one of the worst things that trap people in the limiting factors of their class is envy and wanting everyone to not wanting to be like everybody else, but at the same time not wanting to be a traitor to who you are and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, but I decided instead of just hating this person from a distance, I would just try and work out what he was doing that was effective. And so I started. He had a website, so I didn't have a website. I didn't really think people had websites, but he had his own website. He was on Twitter. I didn't know what Twitter was. I don't think he was on Facebook, which was a good sign. And he just did everything. He just did everything really well. He was just good. He just obviously knew a lot of people, or he was probably observing other people like I was. He was probably looking at Steve Jobs or someone. I thought Steve Jobs was some, like Yellow Pages, people who wanted plumbers or something. So yes, I remember I must have been in contact with him. Maybe, I don't know if I was, but I basically found out how, if on, what would it be? What would I been using? Maybe it was Firefox or something. It wasn't just like your normal browser, but I found out on your browser, you could actually look at the HTML code on the website. I think I bought like HTML for Dummies, but I never read it. So I could see the code for his website that I thought looked really amazing, and I just looked at it and I was like, I'll just copy all this code and I'll stick it. I worked out what a server was. You could pay some money and you had this folder on some server somewhere, whatever a server was, and you could upload stuff like an image or whatever, and your HTML files, and the index.html or HTML was going to be your homepage and blah 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 blah. So I just worked it out back. I kind of worked out backwards, like going backwards, working out how he did it. And so I basically took his website and I just changed all the images. I just changed the image, file, image destination. And then I changed all the text, and I changed like the, bensaunders.com, all that kind of stuff. And I just changed it all to, going to greenland.com or something. And then I just uploaded it all. And there, hey presto, I had like a fully functioning website that it didn't look as good as Ben's. It looked shit basically, but it kind of worked and it did the job. But then, so this is another good thing to learn, is that it's not long afterwards, Ben emailed me and he said, "Hi, in a nice way, he said, you've basically stolen my website, but no worries. But you've also stolen the tracking code at the bottom, which every time someone goes to your website, it's appearing on my tracking data, like people are going to this website." So I was like, "Oh, I do apologize." And I laughed. Anyway, so I laughed it all off. It's a bit like the story about meeting Bear Grylls, and how Bear Grylls was really nice and charming and nice to my wife and stuff. And it was like, that's something you need to learn. Like Ben could have just been really angry and pissed off at me, but what good would it do really? So it's much better to kind of be nice to people who are basically ripping you off and shaming you and stuff. So what's that got to do with this? So I was doing I don't know why I offered to do Johnny Dawes' Kindle book, but because as I say, like Kindle now, I think you're on Kindle 3 or EPUB 3 or whatever it is, but it's just a bit of a nightmare, really. Everything just looks crap. It looks okay if it's just text, but it's if you're going to put any images in, it's always it's just a pain to do. Anyway, but I decided I'd help Johnny Dawes out because I like Johnny Dawes. And anyway, so I did his book, and in those days, if you were selling something on Amazon, they would send you a check. So I think the checks started coming to my house for his book. So I think I just ripped them up. And then I was like, Johnny, you need to give me your bank details. So he gave me his bank details. And then after a month, I said, have you been getting any money? And he was like, no. Anyway, so I checked, and he'd given me the wrong bank details. So somebody was getting paid for it. And then I think I tried like Johnny's one of these people where you end up kind of, you end up just kind of despairing of him. I'm probably exactly the same. You end up kind of despairing of him and just like leaving him to his own devices. So anyway, I got back to him this week after, literally it was 10 years ago, I think, when I did his Kindle book. So it's like, oh, hi, I know it's taken me a while to get back to you, like 10 years, but did you ever sort this out? And he was like, no. So anyway, I've managed to like sign back into his Kindle account, and he'd sold like 600 books or something. He never got paid for them. So yes, I'm trying to sort that out at the moment. Why am I telling you this story? Johnny Dawes, is that probably the most exciting thing that's happened this week? Is like contacting Johnny Dawes. Yeah. Yeah. So there was a reason for telling you about Johnny Dawes. I was actually trying. Speaking of getting in touch with people, that was just off the top of my head. That wasn't meant to be a kind of segue to something else. But I actually went back on. I went on Old Fashioned Technology. I went back onto what's it called, LinkedIn, because I don't have a Facebook. I don't have a Facebook account, but I do have a. But anyway, I didn't have a LinkedIn account. But as someone I know who I used to work for with Montaigne, went off to work for Haglofs in Sweden, and then I saw he'd got a good job as a design manager type person at Mammut. So I went on to LinkedIn to try and get in touch with him, because all his email addresses were for old email addresses. So I managed to get in touch with him. But anyway, so I stayed on LinkedIn. I started looking up all the people, just looking up loads of people who are dead to me, and like seeing what people are up to, like people I've known in like businessy people and all that kind of stuff. Like a few interesting things. One person. I was looking at someone who I used to work with. I was looking at his what was going on his LinkedIn page, and he was talking about somebody. I was like, oh my God, that's the most ugliest woman I've ever seen in my life. Oh my God, that's horrendous, And then I started looking at their name, and I said, like, that actually looks familiar. And then I was like looking closer, and I realized it was actually a bloke I used to know who is now a she, her, or it is. And I was like, oh my God. Anyway, so I was like, I just did not see that happening. Anyway, so I emailed someone. I was like, oh my God, like, I can't believe that X person is now a she, her. And then you're like, and it's like, oh, if you think that's weird, so-and-so is now a she, her as well. I was like, what the fuck? Anyway, so I was looking at so that was kind of knocked me for six. Like one of the people, it doesn't kind of surprise me. Like I don't want to be controversial. I don't want to get like cancelled like J.K. Rowling, but I do completely think all this stuff is this sort of body dysmorphia kind of stuff. I don't believe in the old trans stuff. I definitely some people are born. It's not you're born in the body you're given. Basically, that's the problem. And some people just don't like. I think some people just. I think some people are just on the inside. They're not how they look on the outside. Like they're. Like someone's got like a big nose or whatever, or they've got a funny shape. Their head's too small for their head or something, but inside they don't see themselves like that. They see themselves as somebody completely different. So So yes, that's what it's like. And so it's taken me a few. I'm still trying to get over it. It's kind of. So I say what one person, I don't really. She, her, it, whatever is definitely in my mind. They're definitely not a woman, but they're also definitely not a man. They're just like who they are. Like they were never really. I won't mention any names, but they were always like uniquely themselves, if you know what I mean. They were like amazing, talented, interesting people, but they were just who they were. They were. You could say they were genderless or whatever. It was. So it's kind of. I don't know. I think a lot of reading into it. I think a lot of people go down that route. They don't feel very happy with who they are. So then they try to be somebody else. But they're equally as unhappy as being, Dalvinder or something. And then they probably migrate back to being, just trying to come to terms with who they are. So it's, yeah. Luckily you die, don't you? Like, if you get a shit hand, you die soon enough. So it doesn't really matter eventually. But one thing that was kind of weird was going through being all the old LinkedIn stuff was, I don't know, it's kind of a little bit mad. Like a lot of these people are in the UK and they're all it's like they're all being taken over by, they're all kind of like AI people. They're all saying exactly the same thing. They're all just on some weird, like there was somebody who's going on about, what's it called? Circular, is it circular economy or what's the thing economy where it's like, is it circular economy? Anyway, it's the economy where it's like, buy, mend, give to somebody, find in a bin, blah, blah, blah kind of stuff. And it's like people are obviously on some funding stream that they're getting money from someone to promote this kind of circular economy. And there's people saying, like 2 thumbs up, love heart, high heel shoe, blah, blah, blah. And everyone's like banging on it. And I'm just one of those people where I'm like, everyone, you got like 1,000 comments saying, go for it. This is the future circular economy. And I'm the idiot who comes up and says like, is this not just like what people do? Like, is this not preparing yourselves for like, like the collapse of the economy? And if you can't buy anything, if you haven't got any money, then it is a circular economy. Like whatever you get, you're going to have to keep it for a long time. You're going to have to mend it. And, it's like you're basically taking a concept that most people in the world who are living on like $1 a day, we completely recognize it's like, that's what you do. It's like this new idea, it's called the circular, it's like you call it, inclusive circular anti-racist Christmas, chicken dinner. You get the chicken and then you cook it. And then you take the bones and you put it in a pot and you make some soup out of that. And then you take what's left and you make some more and you make a stock out of that. And then you get the bones and then you make them into like a child's toy or something. And it's just kind of like, oh, that sounds like an interesting, concept. So is that not just what most people, our grandparents did? So yeah, I think I was saying on the other previously, my kind of neighbours, like he was like one of 16 children, and they were so poor that the boys wore like the hand-me-downs from the girls. So the boy is wearing a dress because he had no money to buy him any clothes, and he's out in the wild Irish weather in a dress, like a 4-year-old child. Like that's the circular economy basically, and that dress would probably get made into something else eventually. Like when there was no more girls, you probably, you'd God knows. I remember once when my wife had a baby, there was a woman in the hospital in the same bit where all the women have had a baby, and she was saying like, she was saying, she's that woman over there. That woman's had like 14 children. And I was like, 14 children? 14 children? Like what kind of car would you have with 14 children? And my wife was like, I don't know, but you could park it in your vagina. Anyway, so so it was kind of weird, but it made me think how all these people are basically going to get wiped out, like in the coming, we've got like a recession coming that's probably worse than any of us have ever experienced before in lots of aspects. But you got to laugh, haven't you? And but all these people who are living in this kind of fantasy world, they're basically like good thing about a communist, or a proper socialist is they did actually want to make stuff. They wanted to have factories and women hammering bits of coal and all that kind of stuff. They were actually for about production and making more tractors and, they actually, so these people aren't like communists. They basically just want to destroy themselves and destroy everything else. Like they want to, like I lived through deindustrialization when I was a kid, like in the UK in the 70s and 80s. Like I remember what it was like, but these people are basically cheering it on. And it's really mad. I don't know if they think they'll be the last people to lose their jobs, but I expect they'll probably be the first people, because they're actually, most of them have just got bullshit jobs basically. That's the problem, with a lot of the tech industry. Like all those people losing their jobs, like thousands of people losing their jobs, are not the useful people. They're all the people with the bullshit jobs who are all just going, like so yeah, it's kind of weird. I kind of like put it into a few little, like happy clappy conversations people were having, and people were like really, really offended, So it's just pointless getting involved with those kind of people. So I guess maybe it's like trying to, like when you're, like when you're really afraid of something like a ghost or something when you're a kid, you want to like hide under the cushions. Maybe it's a little bit like that. Maybe the reality is, it's kind of it's a tough thing to deal with. And I guess if you just, like a lot of people I know have given up like quite good careers or even their own businesses, and they've gone into working for the universities. Like in Sheffield, nearly everybody I know works for the university, and it's a bit like a Ponzi scheme. Is the university is getting like bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and they're taking in more and more, exploiting these poor young people, getting all the money off them for bullshit degrees that aren't really worth anything, and suddenly the whole thing's going to burst. And all these people are going to lose their jobs. There isn't going to, it's going to be, I guess it'll go back to how it was, where only like 25% of people go to university. So I don't know. So if you work in the university, I do, I'm sure, like, I don't know what I'm talking about, but it is, you definitely want to get a job, you want to get a job where, even that it's kind of bullshit proof, like a bin man or something, something like that. So anyway, so I should get on to some of these questions because baby's going to probably wake up soon. So, well, the first one I probably won't read it out, but I have quite a lot of questions about drawing pictures. Like I draw quite a lot of diagrams for my books and stuff, and like when I was a kid I was really into drawing, and then I think what I really wanted to do, I really wanted to go in the army, but my mum wanted to go to art college, but she didn't. She had to go and get a job in a bakery instead. So I think she kind of imprinted onto me that I should go to art college. I just wanted to like kill people and stuff, shoot guns and stuff. And so anyway, so I drew all my life until I went to art college. And then I failed to get onto a degree. I did like a foundation course, and I really enjoyed that. But then I didn't get onto a degree. and then I just stopped drawing altogether for years and years and years until I started being like writing gear articles and some technique articles for climb magazines. And so then I started doing some sort of hand drawing, rough drawings that would end up in the magazine. And then I think when I wrote Psychovertical, they said, do you have like an illustrator? We'll have to illustrate some of these mountains and stuff. Do you have an illustrator who'd like to do this? And I was kind of like, oh, bollocks that. I'm not gonna get somebody else to do it. I'll just do it. But I hadn't really done any real drawings for a long, long time. So I just, I think I downloaded Painter, who makes it Corel Painter, on my computer. And I literally banged out all these pictures from a book in like one day and sent them all off. And it ended up in the book. And that was probably the beginning of doing illustrations for the books, for all my books. But they're more like, they're more like pictures of mountains and things. So, but I also needed to be able to do technical drawings of like carabiners and all that kind of stuff. So I end up learning Adobe Illustrator. So Photoshop and a lot of those things, you're just moving like pixels around. So if you drew a line, it's just a load of pixels of a certain color. You can mix them together or whatever, but it's just like a line of pixels of a different diameter. But Adobe Illustrator is a vector drawing thing where it's more kind of, would it be say it was more mathematical? There's still like pixels there on the screen, but it's more, like this line goes from X 300 to X 160 or something, blah blah blah. So, but you're just creating points, and the lines are going between them, and sometimes they're curved, sometimes they're straight, and that's how you build up like a drawing. So it means with a vector drawing is it could be the size of your computer screen, or it could be the size of the house, and it would look the same. It wouldn't look pixelated. Where if you drew a picture which on Photoshop the size of your computer screen, and then you do it to the size of a billboard, it would look terrible. That's why you often in the past used to get people where they'd have an image in a newspaper or in a magazine that was too small, and it would all be pixelated and look terrible. So that's why that used to happen. So anyway, but it probably took me a good 10 years to learn how to, because again, I didn't go any courses and no one taught me how to do it. I think I just got like a free stroke, like dodgy copy of Adobe Illustrator, and kind of learn by like copying other people, like how do they do that? And I would I just try and copy it and slowly learn that way. I always used to tell my son that he should learn Adobe Illustrator because it's a good skill to have. Like a lot of people can use Photoshop, but Adobe Illustrator is like a little bit harder to use. And he always just ignored me, probably because he was only 5. But eventually he ended up going to college for like 2 years and doing design, graphic design. So you learn how to use Illustrator. Anyway, so it's a really good skill. So that's how I do most of nearly all of my drawings. I still use Painter for some things if it's more like arty-farty. So yeah, I use Adobe Illustrator. And the good thing about it is, say you draw like a figure of 8 knot, or you draw like a screw-kit carabiner, you can just take that drawing and you can put it into other, integrate into complex, other drawings. So you only have to draw one figure of 8 and one carabiner or one person abseiling, and you can just more easily just paste it into other drawings. If you ever look at any of my books, you'll see often it'll be the same DMM carabiner will be on every single thing. So it saves a lot of time. It is still quite a long process. So, and you're always kind of improving. You're always like looking at stuff you've already done, and it just looks crap, and you're trying to, you're trying to improve next time. So yeah, it's quite a long drawn out process. I get it, long drawn out process. So yeah, but it's again, it's a good skill. It's like one of those skills, like in terms of my climbing life, you learn all your climbing skills, but it's a bit like you get these people who they're in like Delta Force, or they're in some kind of army thing where they're really good at killing people, but when they leave, they're a kind of limited skill set in the real world. Is like, yeah, what can you do? I can kill people. There's that good bit, is it, in the end of that TV series, The Pacific, very highly recommended TV series, where he says he comes out of the army and he's in somewhere and they say, what can you do? And he's like, I can fire a 60mm mortar or something. And, anyway, but it's that kind of thing. So a lot of your climbing skills aren't really that transferable into the real world. Maybe if you do like rope access or something like that, it could be they're handy, but often maybe they're a detriment. You might be better rope access if you're not a climber, if you just get into it from being a scaffolder or somebody. But other skills, by learning other things, like learning how to write to some degree, learning how to stand on a stage and talk, or learning how to do slideshows, or all these kind of extra sort of bolt-on skills to climbing are really handy later on in life, because you can just make a living doing that thing. I think someone asked me the other day, like, what would you do? Like, something about being a professional climber, and I was like, you're much better learning a trade, as like a trade where you can pick it up and drop it. Like, you want a trade that this is a trade rather than a degree. Like, a trade is much more useful. So if you have a trade, then if you have the right kind of trade, you can probably get a job anywhere in the world. You could go and live in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, some shithole country. You can go anywhere you want with a good trade, and because there's always like a demand for them. And also you make a lot more money than someone who has a degree. Like, yeah, you might, if you're working, you might be making a lot of, but basically you leave school and you're told, and when you're at school, basically the pinnacle of your education is to end up being a professor in a university, and that's what the whole thing is focused towards you doing. But a professor in a university is making a lot less money than a plumber or a carpenter or an electrician or somebody. So, and they're generally kind of fixed in place, and they probably hate their job and they hate the people they work for. Where people with trades, it's very rare to meet one who hates it. Like, sometimes being a plumber might be a shitty job because you got shit to deal with. But a lot of people have got proper trade jobs. They completely they enjoy it, and they often you can be your own boss. So as a climber, rather than being like a mountain guide, where the mountains become the place where you work, and you probably, when you're not working, you're probably not that interested in going into the mountains. You probably end up going road biking or some stupid thing like that instead. If you've got like a trade, you can make a lot of money quite quickly. And as long as I think you need to live like you've got no money. Live as cheaply, as frugally as possible to build up your savings, and then you make enough money, and then you can just go somewhere where you're not going to spend a lot of money. Like, you could go to like Arapalis for 3 months, and then come back and then just start working again, make more money, and then go off to Canada for 3 months, whatever. I think that's the way to probably do it, is to have to build up, and often people are always afraid to kind of turn down work. But I think often people who turn down work end up being valued more highly. Like, if you're really good at what you do, you can just give the impression that you're too busy. That's why you can't do it. But actually, you're not busy at all. You're actually off climbing for 3 months, then you're coming back. But what people often fall into this trap where they just want to, like, money becomes, you have this idea of like, I'm going to do rope access, I'm going to make enough money, and then I'm going to go climbing for 6 months and blah, blah, blah. But you very quickly, human nature, was it a luxury? A luxury becomes a necessity. Suddenly your lifestyle changes. You know, you get a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a it friend, and you suddenly, you know, you don't have any money anymore. You're making all this money, but you've got your fancy car and you've got your gym membership and you're learning to skydive or whatever. You know, suddenly you don't have any time. You have all this money, but you have no time. And then you suddenly don't have any time. You don't have any money because you're just spending all your money on stuff. And then suddenly you're in debt, so you can't stop working. And then you have no time. You have less than no money because all the money's anyway. So it's very easy to get into that thing. So I hopefully, like new generations, you know, of younger people are probably a little bit more savvy. Like not being in debt is probably one of the best things you can do in life. You know, it does make a massive difference. You can maneuver.
Welcome to BreezeLine, where the sky's the limit thanks to better internet. With lightning fast speeds up to 1 gig, you can game like a boss, stream like a pro, and watch like there's no tomorrow. Stream, watch, post, send, and trend. Do it all with our fiber-powered network, bringing you reliable, fast internet. Welcome to BreezeLine. Visit breezeline.com for latest offers. Service subject to availability. New customers in select areas only. Visit breezeline.com for details.
92% of households that start the year with Peloton are still active a year later.
92% because of a bike?
Not just bikes. We also make treadmills and rowers.
Oh, let me guess, for elite athletes only, right?
Nope. It doesn't matter if you're an avid exerciser or new to working out. Peloton can help you achieve your fitness goals. 92% stick with it. So can you. Try Peloton bikes, tread or row risk-free with a 30-day home trial. New members only. Not available in remote locations. See additional terms at onepeloton.com/home-trial.
Venture X from Capital One is the travel card for people always asking,
Where next?
you earn 10x miles on hotels and rental cars, and 5x miles on flights booked through Capital One Travel, and 2x miles on everything else you buy with Venture X. Plus, receive premium travel benefits like access to over 1,300 airport lounges. The Venture X card from Capital One. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com for details.
A lot more, you know, like, you know, the idea of like fuck you money. Like, you don't actually need any money to say fuck you, but you definitely don't want any debt, because you can live with very little money and for a while with no money, but you can't really live if you've got less than no money, if you have to pay someone the money back that you owe them. So it's so yeah, what's that to do with drawing? I have no idea. But anyway, develop skills that are actually useful and practical in a recession or whatever. You know, that's people still need their pipes cleaning. That's not to be about a prostitute, but even prostitution. You know, it's not, I can't. It's hard to get the work. Who you know. Anyway, so we'll go back to a proper question here. So, hi Andy. I have a question for you about the cold. Now, this question is quite old, so this person's either probably dead now of hypothermia, or it's the summertime. So anyway, it might be useful. Background: I am a skier, and I would like to make. I am a skier and would like to be making more backcountry skiing trips, but this year has been struggling. I've been struggling with cold, especially loss of hand function, grip strength, ability to move lower portion of arms functionally. I am 38, physically fit, physically very fit, 5'9", and 70 kilos. Subsequently, I don't feel cold, but figure I must be with this loss of function. It isn't very painful, more I just can't make my hands and wrists move effectively. Have you had any issues with this? Or maybe how to overcome it? How do you do it? Maybe I just need to get fatter. My concern is that one day I'll be experiencing this critical time and could lead to a bad outcome. I could lead to a bad outcome for one of my skiing mates or myself. Well, I'm afraid you've got cancer. No, you haven't. No, I think, well, 70 kilos, 5'9". It sounds like you're a bit too skinny. You You haven't got any belly timber. Like, there's a few things it could be. Like, you could have, like, I don't know if Raynaud's disease I think Raynaud's disease basically means you've got fingers that look white when you hold them up to selfies. People got Raynaud's disease. They're just the kind of people who just whinge on about everything, like, oh, my hands are cold and all that kind of stuff. It's a bit like dyslexia for your fingers, I reckon. It's like, oh, my fingers, they've got no blood circulation. It's like, oh, get over yourself. So things that could be, there could be many things. Sometimes I wonder how heavy your rucksack is. Like, what are you have you got a rucksack on? I wonder, because sometimes, well, it definitely happens if you've got a very heavy rucksack. Is it basically, stops like the circulation into your arms, like that. If your rucksack straps too narrow, if in the wrong place, that could be in effect. But since you're going skiing, you're not going to have a really heavy rucksack on, so that's probably not the thing. Could be, what else could it be? Like if it's just cold, like if you ever had hypothermia, but if you ever fall in the sea and you start swimming and it's super, super cold, if it's like the temperature where you've only got like, you're going to be dead in a short space of time, what you find, it's worth experimenting with this, where in a place where you're not going to drown, is what you find, what happens first of all, is you lose dexterity, your fingers don't work anymore, and then your hands don't work. So if you're trying to swim to the shore, you start losing any dexterity in your fingers, which has an impact when you're swimming, because it becomes much harder to swim because your hands are not, pointing into the water anymore. They're kind of going a bit weird. In mountaineering, what that means is you suddenly can't untie a knot, or you can't, switch on your phone to ring 999, or you can't put on like an EPIRB or whatever it is. So loss of dexterity in your hands does sound like it could be related to cold or circulation or something. So that's why if you ever think if you're ever in a situation where you think you're gonna get hypothermic and you're gonna start losing dexterity, you need to get anything that requires dexterity done very, very quickly. So say you're under a waterfall, you're on a pitch and it starts pouring with water, and the next minute you're under a waterfall. Like if you're tied in to the rope and the rope is going up to a carabiner, then maybe you can't undo the carabiner, and you can't undo the knot. Like the carabiner might suddenly start icing over with the water or something, or your fingers just can't do the carabiner. So then you're like, I'm gonna have to like get my knife out. So you try to get your knife, but now your knife doesn't work because you can't open the knife because your fingers aren't working. So you need a knife where you can somehow hold it in your hand and open it with your teeth or whatever. So like quite a lot of like on El Cap, it's a classic way of people who've died of hypothermia on El Cap, or people die sometimes like sea kayaking and stuff. It is because of things like that. Like they couldn't physically, say they couldn't pull themselves back into a kayak because their hands couldn't hold on to the kayak because their hands were so cold. So it's a good thing to know it's a good thing to be aware of that's going to happen, because then you can deal with it. Can deal with it before it starts happening. You can try and get out of that situation before that happens, or do something like don't use screw gates. Clip into the rope rather than tying into the rope, and all these kind of things. So maybe I wonder if it doesn't say if he. So he doesn't feel like he's cold. Maybe your hands because you're quite. I'd say 70 kilos is skinny, but maybe it's kind of skinny. So I would wonder if you're not wearing enough your hands aren't warm enough to begin with, and that's affecting everything else. So I would probably advise to get rid of stop wearing gloves and just get some mittens instead, and just wear your mittens directly onto your skin. Like, don't wear liner mittens, or just get rid of all that kind of stuff. Just go for a good decent pair, ideally of like synthetic mittens. Like fiber pile might be okay, but you want something where you can still bend them effectively. Like some mittens, they can be quite stiff, so you want something where you've got they're not. Don't get a huge pair. You can get quite a small pair of mittens, like windproof mittens. You don't need Himalayan down mittens or anything, but just something small, and you'll find that your hands will be a lot warmer to begin with. If you're, it didn't say if you're backcountry skiing. So the problem with backcountry skiing is it's very, you get very, very hot when you're skiing uphill, and then you can get quite cold skiing downhill, or you can be very, very hot skiing up onto a ridge, and you're stripping down into pretty much down to your base layer, and then you suddenly break onto this ridge, and then you're battered by the wind, and then you get super, super cold, or one half of your body gets cold, and you just keep on going. So I think it's having like a clothing system that you can dump a lot of heat very quickly, and then you can just sort of cinch it. You can cinch it either way. You can adjust it slowly to correspond with the temperature and the conditions. So that's the problem with if you just, maybe people like strip down, so they've just got they'll have their base layer on, then they'll have the waterproof bottoms, like their bibs or whatever, and then they'll just have the base layer top on, but they won't have a jacket on, and they'll be like skiing up, but they're still going to be like generating a lot of sweat and getting basically quite sweaty. And then you get to the top, and you probably put your jacket on, but you wouldn't put anything else on, and that's going to block the wind. But then there's still a lot of sweat in there, and so it's it's having a good system that allows you to. That's where like your old school soft shell work quite well, in that you could dump a lot of heat. Like like Paramore have some quite good clothing still like that, where you've got very good zippers on the side, and you can vent a hell of a lot of, you want to roll your sleeves up and just basically like taper it down slowly, so you maintain your comfort. And comfort is not being hot, comfort is being comfortable. So you're either hot or you're cold, and that's what you're aiming for. But if you get really, if you are really cold, the first thing you're going to notice is your dexterity's going. Like your ski, how do you hold your ski poles? That's another thing. Like if you're holding your ski poles too high, that's another, like where's the, like all these things are so basic. I doubt it's the problem, but if people who, if you're holding your ski poles at too high a position, you really want to keep your hands below your heart. So if you're doing a lot of very high ski poling, you're holding it very high, that could be a problem. How is the wrist loop set up? Are you using wrist loops? Probably best. A bit like the ice axes is, apart from probably maybe skiing down, it's probably good to get rid of your wrist loops and have poles that have like multiple positions where, like the Black Crow kind of poles, where you can hold them, quite a long way down, and just keep trying to move your hands up and down, shaking your hands out, bit like using leashless tools. The more you keep your hands like gripping onto the pole, the more you're probably going to get cold. So yeah, it's hard to. Maybe you've sorted this out. Send us an email. I'm talking about. I'll email you this podcast. I've covered it. But yeah, tell us how you got on. So yeah. So right, another question. So this is another kind of. They've had some interesting questions here. Good afternoon. Do any of your writings get into how you learn to climb with dyslexia? Any techniques that worked for remembering procedures, knots, etc., or learning more effectively? Visual reminders, maybe. I have a daughter that is 15 that climbs with the mountaineers. I'm looking for practical tips for learning and retaining climbing information and techniques. Things I can suggest to her and her leader that might help. Right now, they know she's dyslexic and they give her more grace, but that's about it. She feels stupid when she blanks or forgets the basic stuff about focusing on more advanced techniques for a while, and it gives them pause as well. Anyway, if any of your writings address this, and you can point me in the right direction, it could be very appreciative. So there's the guy Dick Rutan, who was the first person to fly around the world non-stop. It took him like 9 days. You know, they had like a super lightweight kind of carbon fiber plane and like five tons of fuel. He had like an amazing career in the American Air Force, and then ended up leaving and ended up doing this amazing flight around the world. But he was really dyslexic, and he didn't realize until he was writing his book when he was retired, and like he couldn't be a pilot straight away in the Air Force because he just wasn't good enough, academic enough. But he had like amazing levels of like engineer, sort of like 3-dimensional problem solving, like engineering. He was kind of off the scale with that, but he just wasn't very good on the writing and the reading and everything else. And what he did when he became a navigator, which is still pretty difficult, I would have thought, having to do all the tables and everything else. So he became a navigator. This is in the days where you would be doing like astral projection, or is that something else? But anyway, you're looking at the stars, how to navigate and everything else. But I think what he did actually, when he actually had to be a pilot, he came in and to the classes when he went through pilot school. He actually could already fly. He's actually an expert pilot. Like, he could fly a plane before he had a driving license, and I think by the age of 17, he could fly with passengers. So he could fly at 16, he could fly with passengers at 17, and by 18, he was a commercial pilot, so he could carry stuff in his plane. And he was also a flying instructor. This was all. He was still a kid basically, but the Air Force were like, you're not used to us. You could never be a pilot. But yeah, he was already like an amazing pilot, but he just couldn't do the written stuff and everything else. So eventually, because he's had like a long time as a navigator, they allowed him to go into pilot school. Now, this is a very interesting thing about some dyslexic people, where he was like, although he probably saw himself as a retard and he couldn't do all this kind of stuff. He said that, if I was a pilot, I would be the number one pilot, at the Air Force school, and I would end up flying the F-100, which was like the ultimate jet at the time, which very few pilots got to fly because it was the ultimate jet. So he had very sort of low self-esteem, but very high actuation. I was very similar with. I was like, I'm too stupid to go to university, but if I did, I'd get a first. That was kind of my kind of thing. So, which is kind of borne out in the climbing I did. I often felt very unworthy to attempt something, much less able than all the other people who'd ever done it. But at the same time, I obviously thought I could do it because I tried. And sometimes I got to the top as well. So But what he did is when he actually went to school at the Air Force, he always sat at the front of the class, and in his briefcase he had a tape recorder, and he tape recorded everything that people were saying to him. He took notes, but basically he was doing it through like the kind of oral audio kind of sort of memorizing it that way. And what happened? He ended up being like coming out number one in all the Air Force schools of that year. And because he was he was number one, he could take the first choice of what billet he would take as a pilot. And when they pulled back the curtain with the chalkboard with all the things he could fly, there was 2 posts for like F-100s, so he got to fly the F-100. So it came true what he'd said that he would do. So I'll put a link in this podcast to an interview with Dick and Jocko Willink, which is it's just very interesting on that kind of thing about, people with dyslexia and stuff. Like now, dyslexia again is a bit like the trans thing I was mentioning before. It's not really a thing. I don't think. I don't really believe in dyslexia as a standalone. You're dyslexic, or you're trans, or you're dyspraxic, or you're autistic, or whatever. It's just it's kind of just who you are, really. And it's the same way as some people find coping mechanisms. Like if you feel you're in the wrong body, then you could try and have a sex change, and you think that might sort things out. But the same with if you're dyslexic, like you just got to. There's some real advantages. Like if you're trans, there's a real advantage about being an outsider. That is a real, can be a massive advantage as long as you don't want to be an insider. And the same with if you're dyslexic, you are kind of a bit of an outsider, because things that make sense to everybody else are often don't make sense to you. But you will often see things that other people can't, and some things that other people find really, really difficult, you'll actually find really, 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 really simple. Now, in the case of climbing, like I couldn't tie my shoelaces until I was, like in my teens, basically. I just could not do it. Now, I think one of the issues is that broadly, what a dyslexic person is a bit like someone with ADHD or whatever, or I call it like attention focus syndrome, is that you're not really interested in stuff, so you don't bother retaining it, or if you're not interested in it, you're just not interested in it. So I wasn't really interested. I could get by without, I could get shoes with Velcro or whatever. I could kind of do a higgledy-piggledy knot, but it always came undone, so my shoes are always undone all the time. Like I basically spent a lot of my childhood wearing Wellingtons, basically. But when it becomes important, then you can, like I'm not someone who can tie 1,000 knots. I have friends who can tie every knot in the world. Like I can only tie a few knots, but I'll tie them pretty well, No, but like I'm not good at retaining things that I don't find useful. So I'll get very interested in something, and I'll, like at the moment, I've got like a what do you call it? A pan, a cast iron frying pan. Now I've never had a cast iron frying pan, but I'm trying to become an expert in cast iron frying pans. So I'm like watching lots of YouTube videos. I just like the idea of having a pan that's going to last forever, rather than all these. Because we have all these. You get like a frying pan, and my wife likes to get the frying pan so that it's like roasting hot, like it's like going to burst into flames, and then she just puts it in the sink in the cold water. So then it ends up looking like a balloon. It's like it's like a wok all of a sudden. So any fat you put in it just goes straight to the middle, and that's it. So anyway, so I quite like the idea of having a cast iron frying pan, like a kettlebell that you can like cook on. So anyway, so that's an example of like suddenly I'm really interested in like different kinds of oils and fats, and the temperature of the sort of the just loads of stuff, like how when you season it, like what is this seasoning a pan, what does it actually mean, and how do you do it, and blah blah blah. So anyway, So, but I'm only doing that because I'm interested in it, and a lot of the information will just be forgotten. And so, with like the climbing big walls or climbing techniques, you know, like a lot of it, you kind of forget it. Like a lot of the stuff to do with numbers and forces, I just kind of forget them really. Like if I'm writing a book, I have to kind of understand them to write a book, but then once the book's finished, I'll probably just forget them. Like I can't tie like a Zeppelin bend, even though it's in one of my books, and I could tie it when I wrote the book, and I thought it was a useful knot, but I can't remember how to tie it now. So, you know, so it's but something like a Monster Munter hitch, I can remember how to tie that because it's one of those knots where I've had to use it in the real world, and it was like incredibly useful. It probably saved my life, so I retained that knot. But other knots, like less so. Like I couldn't tie a bowline for years and years and years because I just couldn't remember how to do it. It always used to come undone, and then for some reason I started knowing how to do it, and I just retained it. And even now I might get it wrong a few times. So I think. Like it's kind of rare that someone with dyslexia, like again, it's like a very broad term, dyslexia. It could be just you're not very good at remembering anything. If you know what I mean, you know, maybe you're not cut out to be a climber. Maybe you're good at playing the violin or something. You know, like often when you're teaching people to climb, so you're doing like a big wall course, how to climb a big wall. And the person will turn up, and you're like, "Okay, put your harness on," and they can't put their harness on. Like they can't coordinate putting the feet in the right loop, and the belay loops, you know, the wrong way around, and the belay loops on the back of their harness or something. And I'm like, I don't think this is probably what you should be doing, you know. So it's like taking someone for a driving test, and they get in the back of the car, you know. It's like, I've actually ever been in a car before, so it's. Yeah, like I guess repetition, but even repetition, you know, get a book of tying knots and just focus on the most important ones and get a piece of rope and just keep tying them. Like, and often people will say things like, you know, I could never remember the alphabet. Or, you know, like things like nouns and all that kind of stuff. And I never remember any of that kind of stuff. But people would always say, you know, I can't remember any of them already to give you the example, but it's like E after D, except after B or something. It's like, what the hell? Like, you can't give me a stupid thing like that. Like, you know, never put a C in front of a D unless there's a B. You know, it's like, what are you talking about? It has to just, you know, just... Anyway, so so like if you think about you know, like a bowline, like the rabbit comes out the hole, around the tree, and back in the hole. Like it's like for me, it's like there's like a lake, and the snake comes out, and it goes down the tree and back in the lake. Like for some reason, I find it easier to remember than the one about the rabbit, because like the thing about the hole is the tree has to be behind the hole. You know, like the tree could be in front of the hole, but really it's behind the hole. But if it's actually a lake, you know, the tree is behind the lake. I can visualize a lake with the tree behind it, you know, and the snake is coming out of the lake and around the tree and then slithering back into the lake. That might not work. But anyway, but it's finding ways. Like I could never remember the word hypocrite. So I can visualize a hip. So whenever I have to think of the word hypocrite, I would think of a hip, or there as a place. It's got an H in it, and an H is the same is house. House has got an H at the beginning of it. A house is a place. So there with an H has got an H in it. What's the other there? Isn't it a where? Yeah, where. Maybe I'm thinking of where. Where has got an H in it as well. Anyway, it's not foolproof, the system I'm using, but it isn't really an excuse to be dyslexic. It's not an excuse. It's not a disability. It's just something you need to, you know. You could be that person who's like laid in a bed and can just wink with one eye. You know, like just get over yourself. You can work it out, and if you can't work it out, just tell people you're not very good at it. And people are generally forgiving. Like if you say you're really good at something and you're crap at it, that's not forgivable. Like if you say, someone's having a heart attack, and you stand, you say like, stand back, I know what to do, and you start rubbing their hands together or something, or trying to get water out of the lungs, that's not forgivable. So if you're like, oh, I don't know what to do, you do it, and then sometimes the more you're not good at stuff, the better you are at having methods of dealing with that, and just, living in this like space of like chaos where you just have to improvise all the time. Like I don't, speaking of heart attacks, there's always like the, do it this way, do it that way, like ha 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 ha, staying alive, doing that kind of rhythm. But then you'll see somebody else and it'd be like, be like some kind of like some song you've never heard of, like Chumbawamba or something. Anyway, so yeah, but you'll see on someone on Instagram, and it's like, why is it telling me to do it this way? Like I thought you had to do it the other way, And then what about the breathing? How often am I supposed to breathe in this person's mouth? But when you actually, I was climbing at the climbing wall once, and someone had a heart attack, and they basically were dead. They were also like climbing, which is lucky they weren't belaying. But anyway, but they were lowered down, and by the time they got on the ground, they were dead. And you saw all these people who were trained and knew what to do, but they basically probably didn't know what to do, and loads of things just didn't go how you think they would go in that situation. So sometimes, like things like they had one of the defibrillators, and they kind of ran there with this defibrillator and they stuck it on, but the patches didn't work. They just fell straight off again. They like dried out or something, and just being able to be calm and just think through, often if you're not prepared, maybe you're better in that situation. You can be calmer because you've got nothing left. You've got nothing to lose. You know what I mean? In a court of law, you just did your best. You didn't have any qualifications. So yeah. I don't know. It's hard to. I think that like it's funny that like often your parents, the fact that this parent is concerned enough to contact me to help their daughter is probably a good thing and a bad thing. Like sometimes, like when my son, when they told me he had ADHD or some bollocks like that, the worst thing is to then be diagnosed with something and go through the rest of your school days being like, oh, I've got ADHD, and excuse every bullshit thing, Like I'm sure they knew all this stuff existed, like in the past when no one got any labels, but they just kind of like beat it out of you. There was no kind of, you were just thick basically, and a lot is. It's pretty cruel. It's probably better to go through life thinking you're thick than thinking you're disabled, if you know what I mean. So I don't know. Did they have any of these things? Like someone said that I was very dyslexic at school, but they didn't diagnose these things because if they did, they had some kind of, they'd have to put some money into it or something. They'd have to give you some special lessons or something. So they just said I was like slow at stuff, slow at reading and everything else. So I think there's probably something to be said for it. So yeah, maybe if your parent is overly concerned about your dyslexia, maybe that could be a negative. Maybe like I definitely spend a lot of time with my son and my daughter, because he's supposed to be dyslexic, trying to make them realize that isn't important information, basically. Like my daughter is supposed to be dyslexic. She has to have special extra time, when she was at school, extra time for exams, and she's supposed to get a free computer and all that kind of bollocks. But she got like a first in maths. Do you know what I mean? She's like highly successful person. It made no difference to her life being dyslexic. I think for my son, it probably has had an effect. How he visualizes himself. I think that's why you don't want to get divorced, because you got one parent inputting loads of shit into your child, and you got another parent trying to deprogram them from all this kind of stuff. But once you divorce, you don't really have enough. The programming can stick really. So yeah. Right, I think the baby must be awake by now. It must be time to take this baby for a walk. So I better leave it there. So yeah, I'll send this podcast to this lady with her dyslexic daughter, and I'm sure this isn't very positive. This is probably not what you want to hear, but I think you just have to rise above it. I think you have to see it as an advantage. Like even if that guy laid in bed who can only wink and has got locked in syndrome, he has an advantage. Like he sees the world in a very unique way, So yeah, that's a great bit of wisdom there. Okay, what am I going to talk about next time? Something amazing. I am actually thinking about doing a separate podcast with no waffle, and just talking about clothing to tie it into this book that I'm eventually going to write. This what's it called? By a Thread, it's called. So I might do that, because it might be good to get rid of some of the waffle. I know some of you like the waffle, but it'd be quite good to do something a little bit more focused on one thing, which is that this is a classic dyslexic brain of mine. I don't even have time to do this bloody podcast, and I'm talking about doing another one as well. So that's a good example of what I'm talking about. So yeah. Anyway, until next time, see you soon.
Welcome to BreezeLine, where the sky's the limit thanks to better internet. With lightning-fast speeds up to 1 gig, you can game like a boss, stream like a pro, and watch like there's no tomorrow. Stream, watch, post, send, and trend. Do it all with our fiber-powered network, bringing you reliable, fast internet. Welcome to BreezeLine. Visit breezeline.com for latest offers. Service subject to availability. New customers in select areas only. Visit breezeline.com for details.
The Venture X card from Capital One gives you premium travel benefits, perfect for seeing Taylor Swift The Eras Tour. Presented by Capital One. Ooh, I do love her. Earn 5 times miles on flights and 10 times miles on hotels through Capital One Travel.
Enjoy your stay in Suite 13.
Whoa, 13? That's Taylor's lucky number. The Venture X card from Capital One. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com for details.